Hey everybody, sorry about that. So we're going to get started. My name is Andrew Watrous. I'm one of the co-organizers of this event, along with Jordan Amadillo, who's here, who's going to be running our panel, and Patrick Spicer, who's in the back taking pictures. So welcome, this is our second event. We're really excited to have you. We had quite a wait list for this, so for our next two events, we're going to have more space downstairs. And with that, we're going to get started with our first set of panelists and with Jordan Amadillo.
Thanks. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, welcome everyone. It's really a pleasure to see you all here today. This is a great turnout, and this is the second event. So the first one we had was in April, was the kickoff. This is a series that will now be at least quarterly. So we have a commitment, we have a co-sponsorship from Capital Factory and Ascension Seton to run this event quarterly, but we're going to probably pepper some other events in the calendar as well in between as this gets more popular. We actually had, I think, 56 people on the waiting list for this event, and so we're trying to make sure we have a good turnout, but making sure the list is quality in the sense that people are coming when they say they're coming. And so thank you all for coming, and please feel free to share this to other members of the community who may be interested. And we're trying to really generate sort of a recurring value stream here for everybody. I'm Jordan Amadillo. By brief introduction, I'm the program director for the Ascension Seton Innovation Fellowship. My two fellows this year are Dr. Patrick Spicer and Dr. Andrew Watrous. And the three of us are working together along with many others to make this program a reality. We'd love to get your input, and we'd love to have all the people in the room who are either entrepreneurs, physicians, administrators, other interested parties, investors, tell us kind of how we can serve your needs. The purpose of these events is to generate value. We're not making money from this. The only reason we're doing this is to generate value for the community. And so I had someone come up to me earlier and tell me, they were an entrepreneur in the health space, and they couldn't get past the people at the desk, right? The sort of faceless bureaucrats at the desk. All they wanted to do was talk to clinicians. That's the problem that we're trying to solve here. We're trying to kind of eliminate those barriers, and people can come together in this room and hopefully meet one another and knock those barriers down and do great things. So thank you, and please stay with us for this event. We're going to have a 1-hour program with a panel followed by some lightning round pitches. The lightning round pitches not intended to be investor pitches necessarily, but they can be from startups, from individuals working on projects, from public health projects, pretty much anything, okay? And we welcome you to submit your ideas and come up. It's like these mini TED Talks, no preparation necessary. So next time, please come share what you're working on. After that, we'll have a cocktail hour. We've got some refreshments here, and happy connecting. We're going to begin with our panel to call up Dr. Bobby Kurian to join us. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks, Jordan.
I see Ms. Victoria Odell, who just entered. Victoria, welcome. Come on up from Capital City Innovations. And Bobby, I'll let you introduce yourself, but you're from RFMX and Ascension Seton. Correct. Cardiology. Okay, right? Third panelist, we have Tyler Drake from Austin Bioscience Incubator, right? Hey, welcome. And guys, have a seat. All right. Thanks. You okay? Running a little late. It's okay. We've all been there.
Right in, right to the
We've all been there. Deep breath. No, we won't start with you. Well, great, guys. So, this is a really illustrious group of panelists, and I feel very honored that they've all agreed to be here today and share what they're working on with us. The topic of this panel, different panel every time. Today's topic is going to be, what will the Austin ecosystem look like for health innovation in 5 years? So it's sort of, I'm asking our panelists to riff a little bit today on what the near-term future looks like for us. I mean, what's the adjacent possible for Austin when it comes to health innovation, and how do we all kind of plug into what's next? So that'll be the theme today. I'd like to start by asking the panelists just briefly go through and give a 30-second introduction to themselves and what they're working on. Tyler?
Sure. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Tyler Drake. I'm the director of the Austin Community College's Bioscience Incubator. So this is a 8,500 square foot leasable wet lab space where we work with startup companies at the former Highland Mall, which is about 3.5, 4 miles north of here. It's part of a larger renovation of the Highland Mall. It's a very unique space in that we work with, these are real startups. We have 17 member companies right now. About 75% of those companies are what I would consider healthcare technologies. So everything from diagnostics, new drug discovery, therapeutics, personalized medicine. And this is happening on a community college campus, which is super, super unique, not only in Austin, but really across the country. So another thing that makes us unique is we are a fully equipped facility. So we have somewhere around $1.6 million worth of equipment that our member companies get access to. And all this is actually managed by Austin Community College students, which we hire as part-time employees to help run the facility. So we're almost completely full. We opened up 2.5 years ago, and business is good. So I went longer than 30 seconds, but a lot of people don't know that this is happening. It's a super interesting story, not only the transformation of the sort of the real estate that's happening, but the new technologies that we're creating just north of here.
All right, well, first off, I'm working on catching my breath. I just ran over here from Del Med. I do not have a car and did not know it was going to rain today. But my name is Victoria Odell, and I'm Programs and Communications Manager for Capital City Innovation. We're a new nonprofit that's working on convening the stakeholders for Austin's Innovation District that focuses on healthier community and economic development for all. Quick background, we were founded by Central Health, Seton, and UT Austin, and we've gotten support from Opportunity Austin, the Chamber, and Downtown Austin Alliance. So I'm new to health and healthcare. My background's actually in design, but I've been a big advocate for things like open data, community technology, and just being really involved in local government. So I'm really excited to be here and speak with y'all.
My name is Bobby Curran. I am a cardiac electrophysiologist, and currently I also, along with Jordan, work for Ascension Seton. I just literally got out of clinic and was able to get here on time, so I'm thankful for that. I wear different hats, and one's a researcher hat, and one's a clinician hat, and one's an entrepreneur hat. And so, I try to blend those three worlds because I think that's where a lot of need is. There is a lot of need currently, and that's where I enjoy being. And so I'm involved in a variety of startups, and I've started a couple of companies. And two companies that I've started, Cardionex and AF Therapeutics, are involved in my space in developing better tools to make AF ablation safer and better. My most recent startup, my co-founder Jude Sampson's here with me with that. It's called RFMX, the digital health platform to help make patients' lives better through lifestyle intervention and digital health tools. So that's kind of my background, and I give kudos for Jordan and Capital Factory for creating the structure and the venue to allow this type of conversation to occur. So this is great. So it makes me really excited to know that there was a wait list of over 50 people wanting to come in here because there's that much of a need here. And so I think that's what Austin's been lacking, and so it's great to see that structure forming. So.
It's great. Thanks. It's definitely not just me. It's the team of these guys who made it happen. And thank you to Capital Factory for hosting us. I'd love to get a word from each of you, maybe starting with Victoria, about how you think things are going to look in Austin 5 years from now. What's the best case scenario, and how do we get there compared to where we are today? And in particular, I had by way of background, a great meeting with you and Chris Lang a few weeks ago, where I heard just incredible things about what you're planning with Capital City Innovations, the old Brackenridge site, and what's going to happen there. It really excited me, and it made me aware that really not a lot of people have an awareness of what you're planning. So tell us just a little bit about that and how you see things taking shape over the next 5 years.
Yeah, so for a little bit of background, Chris Lang is the Executive Director for Capital City Innovation. We're a team of two. He's currently at Bio, so he's away right now, so you don't have his great Australian accent. Sorry, it's just me, y'all. I'm from Texas. But as Jordan mentioned, and as I spoke about, we're working on actually creating something known as an innovation district here in Austin that focuses on healthier community outcomes and economic development or economic growth for all. And for folks who are unaware, across the street from Dell Medical School is the old Brackenridge campus owned by Central Health. And Central Health is one of our stakeholders, and they're interested in redeveloping that space to maximize the amount of profit they'll get to then re-put into Travis County's underserved and uninsured population. So we're working with them to make sure that that space, not only do they maximize the value, but we also get the right tenants in the space that are really going to partner and leverage the other community members like DelMed, like groups like BioAustin, Health Tech Austin, Seton, and really not just have like a space where innovation is happening, but a space where innovation is happening that really connects to and impacts the community positively. So I think this year, actually, the Brackenridge campus is starting to get demolished. It's not going to be a big explosive demolition, but it is starting this summer, taking the building down. So I think in 5 years, we'll definitely be seeing the initial buildings for Austin's Innovation District. But I think along with the physical development, we'll be building more partnerships with people in the health innovation ecosystem, so we can all collaboratively work on shared goals and create solutions for Austin that can also scale across the U.S. and maybe even the world. Seton, has a presence here, but they're all throughout the U.S. And with DelMed's Health CoLab being connected with organizations like ABHI, which is the Association for Business Health. ABHI, I was just writing an article about them today, but they're UK's health tech organization. So there's opportunity not just nationally, but also internationally for us to make a real big impact. Aside from the physical place, I'll just touch on, I think, the partnerships and data sharing agreements. I think we'll also provide a pathway for us to have shared insights and hopefully shared metrics for what really is impactful.
So this incredible infrastructure is coming down the pike, and it's coming soon, right? And it seems to me that in order to fill that infrastructure, you need to have a lot of little Bobby Kurians running around. People who are innovative, people who are maybe physician entrepreneurs, maybe entrepreneurs working with the health delivery system or physicians. And so the question is, how do we, maybe Bobby, tell us, how do we attract more people like that to Austin? And maybe share some of your story and maybe some reflections on, what you think makes a good ecosystem. What kind of people should we be, trying to foster and support and encourage?
Yeah, that's, I guess in answering that question, I can kind of relay how I ended up in Austin. So, I trained at WashU in St. Louis, and they actually had a great ecosystem in terms of facilitating innovation amongst the medical students and the residents and so forth. And I'm blanking on it was actually an entity created by the medical students themselves, and WashU participated and kind of dropped the barriers of bureaucracy with intellectual property. And what they ended up doing was creating a center similar to what you're describing over at BRAC, but housed in that was an IP, attorney's office, right? So, and they were free of charge for the students, and so you had these little areas designed where students could come together. They would create these multidisciplinary teams to be able to identify a problem clinically, and then, I love the fact that you have no healthcare background. Your background's in design. Well, maybe that's what we need, right? We need a different perspective. And so it's good to cross-pollinate amongst different disciplines, not necessarily just in medicine, but across all specialties, because that's when we really draw from each other's experiences to really solve a problem. Because, I've been trained in one way. I think I've been trained well, but maybe I get stuck at looking at a problem in one way, where someone else with a different set of experiences is like, well, look at the, here's a completely different way to look at things. And I've seen that, and that's why I like working with engineers and people from different disciplines, because you get to see a problem from a different perspective, and you learn from other people that, okay, this is another way that it can potentially do this. Maybe my entrenched way is not the best way, and if it's a reasonable enough argument, you pursue in that pathway. And so I think what draws me to Austin is that I see the components of that. I don't think it's quite put together, but clearly there is the movement with, from the things that Capital Factory is doing, Dell, Seton Ascension. There's clearly plenty of physician entrepreneurs and healthcare entrepreneurs that are interested in that have it. So there's this bubbling of energy, that isn't structured or channeled yet. And right now I'm beginning to see that structure and channeling of that energy into something where we're going to begin to see startups cranking out in Austin, because now we're being able to lower those barriers where, okay, when a physician or a clinician or whoever they be has a problem and an idea, we'll be able to create a pathway, or as you're doing, Jordan, with respect to, okay, here's some clinicians that you can meet, or here's some engineers, or okay, here's the attorneys that you need to talk to in terms of starting a business. And so I think I'm very hopeful and excited about the next 5 years in Austin, because I think those structures are going to develop. I think the medical school as one entity, UT has great law school, great business school. They have a great engineering school. They have great basic sciences. And so now we have the opportunity to begin to mix all those fields together with the culture that Austin has in terms of startups, which is exciting in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, in putting together this Roundtable series just to launch this program, we surveyed the Seton med staffs. These are all the physicians who are privileged to work at any of the Seton hospitals, which is a pretty large number of people. And we'll present this data maybe at the next roundtable. But we were pretty blown away by the responses. We had, Patrick, you probably remember the number. There was, what was the number, the fraction of physicians who had been either involved in inventing a product or being involved in a startup?
Roughly 200 respondents, about 20% of those, about 30 had been involved as either a founder or someone who was intimately involved in a startup.
Yeah, so I mean, it's incredible, right? So 20% of the physicians that we surveyed at Seton had either been involved in founding or closely involved in the inner workings of a startup. I mean, that blew me away. I mean, that really, of course, there's some self-selection there, but still, that's an incredible number just from an email survey. And so I think the undercurrent of talent here is even greater than people realize. There's a lot of latent talent, and there's a lot of folks who, I think will blossom once given access or pathway to the resources. That's what we're trying to do. So maybe along those lines, and to any of you panelists, I mean, someone's in this room. They're coming here today because they have something they're working on, right? They have maybe a prototype, maybe it's just an idea. They're looking to grow it into a startup, and they a healthcare startup, and they need to find the right partners, maybe co-founders. What would your advice to them be? In here today, 2019, in Austin, what would you tell them to do?
Well, I can describe my own experiences, which has been that over and over again. Why? At least I decide to do something, which is probably similar to any healthcare provider who creates something, is based on a problem. So I literally just finished seeing about 26, 77 patients in clinic. Half of them have AFib. The interventions for AFib are far from perfect, so I see a lot of failure, right? And so seeing that over and over again is what pushes me to innovate. There's got to be a better way, right? I mean, it's pretty demoralizing when you have a patient who is suffering from something and you're trying to help them get better, and at least with the tools that we have in this day and age, they're far from perfect. And so, so it always starts with, okay, a sense of empathy to help your patient get better, right? So that was always the cornerstone of any of the startups. And so then, that provides the energy, at least for me, to say, okay, let me figure out how, go into my research hat. How does this work? What's the mechanisms? What are the tools that can be built? So once you get to the point where you build a prototype and so forth, what's the next step? Well, there's lots of next steps, and there's definitely defined stages of startups, and you can read about it. And Stanford Biodesign has a great big book that you can read about their entrepreneurship program, which is great. But openly, on a practical level, at least from my own experience, it's always about really, well, what's that next step? And can I do that next step well? So once I've created that prototype, I have to ask myself, okay, what's the next step? Do I need to raise money? Do I need to do intellectual property? Do I need to, is my business intact, legally, right? And so usually what I found is that in moving to that next step, somehow or another, the doors open in terms of what the right next step is. So I'll tell you, the steps for my first 2 startups were a little bit different than the steps for my 3rd startups. And if I followed the exact replica of the first one or the second one, it doesn't really apply to the 3rd one because it's a different space altogether. And so I think what, taking that next step necessarily means is that, okay, what's the problem that's right in front of me that I need to achieve? We all want this to create something and someone to buy it and to be used in millions of patients, but really you have to figure out literally what's my next step in front of me to get me to the next stage of this development. And whether that's further developing or doing out a clinical study, it just depends on where you're at in that development. But it's really focusing what that next step is, and then how do I do that step well, right? Or excellent. And then once you hit that step, then you decide, okay, what's the next step? And you kind of go from there. So I think, there's standard answers. Okay, you got to have good, co-founders. You got to get along. You got to make sure they're the right person. You got to make sure you raise X amount of dollars. And those are all more or less true. But when you actually go through it, you break it down to even simpler steps. And it's really like, okay, what do I have to achieve tomorrow, right, to hit my agenda for the next 3 months? And then once I get to the next 3 months, I come up with another 3-month timeline and so forth, and kind of go from there. And it's important. And the reason I talk about, first mentioned, it starts out with literally dealing with a patient problem that drove me to do it to begin with, because none of it's easy. All of it's hard, right? Starting a company is not a pleasant experience. There's some joy in it, and there's some fun, no doubt, but most of it's pain. Anyone here do research, like basic research? Most of that's pain, right? Most of it's just failure, running into walls over and over again with a few aha moments, right? And so that's, those are the similarities, which I think is why I tolerate the whole entrepreneurship game, is because, it's the same deal in research, really, except maybe the payoffs are a little bit bigger. But in that regard, in that light, it goes back to, I always have to root myself when, things aren't going that well. Well, why am I doing this to begin with? Like, why do I care? Well, at the end of the day, I know that the payoff, yes, maybe there's a financial payoff, but people's lives can be greatly impacted based on what we do. And that empathy to create something for someone else has power, right? And that's what actually drives you forward to take that next step, whatever it is, finding the right founder, raising capital, whatever, but that's the for me anyway, has been the core of like, why am I doing this? Because it's a lot of energy and I'm busy enough as it is. I barely got here, right? And so, but that's the core of driving me forward to be able to be successful. And I think I've been reasonably successful so far. So, but that's my personal experience in terms of like, well, there's practical advice. I'm happy to chat with any of these practical things that do have to get done in terms of dotting your I's and crossing your T's. But at the end of the day, it literally is a day-to-day battle that you gotta make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, because it's gonna be a lot of time and a lot of pain. But there's a lot of fun too, and there's a lot of excitement in terms of developing things and the people you meet, and a lot of it's who you meet in that process, in that journey, right? You meet a lot of smart people, you learn from them, you grow with them, and so that's kind of how I view or advice anyway that I would give for entrepreneurs in general, is that, okay, why are you doing it? What's the next step? As long as you feel like you're doing it for the right reason, accomplish the next step, the right door will open.
So find your why, then find your how.
That's right.
Yeah, good. In terms of Tyler incubators, so at what point in time should an entrepreneur, someone who's in the early stage of their process, be joining an incubator, and what should they be looking for when they do that?
Yeah, so and I'm going to answer this question from the viewpoint of a life science incubator, right?
Yeah.
Hard science, dirty science, wet lab. A place like Capital Factory with a desk and a computer might be a totally different answer. But incubator facilities like the one that we operate at ACC, the workspaces at Dell, and a lot of the other groups that Chris and Victoria have pulled together are fantastic places for prototyping ideas. That very early stage, de-risking some of the science to the point where you can go raise money. The gap, and I'm just going to talk about this now maybe, that exists in the Austin ecosystem from my viewpoint and from the viewpoint of a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with, is that next step. So once you have your data and you're doing work that now needs to be regulated, and you need control of your own equipment, you need control of your own space, whether it's for the FDA or DEA reasons. Austin really, as we sit today, and I know Chris and Victoria are working on this as well, really missing that next sort of stage 2, halfway house incubator, we'll call it, where you have all your basic science done on shared equipment, the shared resources that UT provides, that Dell Medical provides, that we provide at ACC. Where do you go next after you raise that, let's say, Series B or Series C, but you're not yet selling on the market? So that's been my pitch for like the past 2 years of like, someone please help do something. Because the state, the city, the institutions are investing a lot of money to support companies at a very early stage, which is fantastic. We're keeping them alive for those first couple years, and there's literally hundreds of them in Austin right now. But that next Valley of Death still exists, and they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to the coast where these facilities exist. So
give me a picture. What does that
message.
look like? So let's say that existed in Austin. We built that over the next 5 years. Yeah. What does that look like?
It looks like a 50 to 75,000 square foot facility, modular, good HVAC, utilities. Like there's practical things that these folks need, where they're not locked into a 10-year lease that a lot of the places require now, where you can go and do those infrastructure changes. So it really is, like the bones of a place where you can put companies in. They can grow from 6 to 50 people, 50 employees, before they can go and, Austin's expensive, right? And before you can afford your own real estate.
To what extent can a lot of let's say the companies that you work with that are predominantly bioscience in some fashion, to what extent can today in the modern era they outsource a lot of their regulatory and laboratory testing processes?
They do a lot, especially on the regulatory. There's a host of consultants that folks work with, and what we're seeing more and more, which I think is a really cool model that's coming up in Austin, is a lot of the work that used to get outsourced to CROs is now starting to happen here, because there are some facilities available. For example, we have a lot of companies that will do cell studies on a new therapeutic in our lab, in our tissue culture, and they're doing their formulation studies over at DDI, at the University of Texas. So there's mechanisms here in place. And that's the other piece of advice we always tell our companies is like, the stuff's here, and utilize UT. It's a giant institution with a ton of resources. I think that was mentioned before. Use them as long as you can. I know there are barriers to it, but sometimes dealing with some bureaucracy is better than paying out of pocket. And it's really exciting to see Dell Med School come into this fold, and just at the edge of my seats, waiting to see how this pipeline gets developed. So companies, we follow them the whole way through, and not just support them in the very beginning, but then sort of leave them hanging.
I see. And Victoria, idea how Capital City Innovations is going to make all that happen?
Yeah, that's setting up for you. Give me the answer, Victoria.
Oh, man. That's a lot. So we're in our second year of operation, but I think as we continue forward, just working to convene the different folks in the ecosystem to, I think, coalesce around shared needs. I think everyone brought up, or there's a conversation around like what's missing, and we've started to aggregate some of the organizations and programs that are providing space for these Austin innovators. So Tyler mentioned our group. So it's like starting to get folks like not just Tyler with ACC Bioscience Incubator, but also folks as far as Temple at their Health and Bioscience District, San Marcos, their Star Park, getting ATI plugged in, and now the new Med2 Market, and getting these people on the same page so we can really understand where our gaps are and how we might start creating resources or at least aggregating resources that would benefit the whole community. I think that's going to take time, but I think starting to build relationships and coming from the point of, we want Austin to be successful. We want Austin innovators to be successful. We want our community to be healthier. I think that's what everyone here wants. And I think us being able to at least work, hopefully, to organize that in a way that shows that we're trying to rise everyone's, boats or whatever the metaphor or whatever is. Well, I hope that answered it somewhat well. But yeah, I think the aggregation of resources is sort of key. So getting plugged in.
So we have time for one last little question on the panel, and then we got to wrap it up. So for each of you, I think we all kind of in this room, everyone here is a health innovator in some way. We all have a vision in our brain about what the ideal picture looks like of everything coming together around communities like this in Austin, around some of the organizations that you work with. 5 years from now, we have an idealized vision of what things look like, right? If you had to pick one word, we get creative. Pick one word that gets that's okay. That gets us from where we are today to where we are then, to that idealized vision. What would it be? See how good you guys are.
I can go first.
Okay.
Partnership. I don't know if you want comment, but that would be my one.
One word. Okay. Partnership.
Dedication. So.
Mine's similar to yours. I was going to say teamwork.
All right. Love it. Thank you, guys. This has been great. Please thank our panelists. Real quick, guys. Sit. Picture the panel real quick.
My heart rate is
Yeah. Blood pressure.
Right, let me just like.
Thanks, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Do all hats, huh?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Patrick Spicer. I'm one of the Seed and Innovation Fellows as well. I'm a physical medicine rehab doctor. Next, we're going to do the lightning pitches. So first, I'd like to say that after this, we're going to have networking. So if you liked what some of the panelists were saying or didn't like it, I guess, perhaps as well, you have a chance to talk to them afterwards. Sorry, panelists, for saying that. And then also, we're not going to do any questions during the lightning pitches. So these are 3 people are going to come up and talk. But again, the networking is right afterwards. So if you have something you're itching to ask one of them, just save it for afterwards and you can talk to them then. Okay? I'm going to be pretty strict on time. Sorry, guys. We just got to make sure we're moving through everything. So first up, we got Rocky Kelly coming from Cardiovisual. Here we go.
All right, can everybody hear me without the mic?
I heard. There we go. You want to
I can talk louder. Is that all right?
Okay.
I'd rather not hold it at that.
Thanks, Rocky. That was great. So our next one coming up is going to be Daniel Baldoni with Baldoni Neuromodulation. Hey. And one thing I forgot to mention as well is we had a huge influx of these submissions. So for people that are here that we didn't pick yours to submit tonight, there's lots of other opportunities. We actually had a much more than we were expecting of people that wanted to give pitches. But here you go.
All right, thank you. Hi everyone. I'm Daniel Baldoni, founder of Baldoni Neuromodulation. First, I'd like to thank everyone who organized this event. It's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to start. So thank you to Capital Factory and everyone involved. So my company, if you see on the slide here, I have a big X around this neuromodulation implant. So that is a spinal cord stimulator. So it's a roughly $2 billion industry to help patients with chronic pain. And I worked at a company developing that technology for implantables for the spine and also for deep brain stimulation. And I actually recently started my own company based off of trying to take that technology to the next level, and that is getting the same efficacy from an implantable, but doing it non-invasively. And I made a prototype that is functional, actually. So it's based on it's a transcutaneous electrical nerve inhibition device. So if you are familiar with TENS units, if you go to the pharmacy and they have these little adhesive pads you stick on your body and it tickles the pain away. It's sort of a more advanced one of that combined with ultrasound to focus the current. And I filed IP on this, and I'm in the stage of figuring out the 510K submission, which involves basically, the panel was talking about this, like regulatory submissions are very complicated, and you have to there's predicate devices, and there's ways to navigate through the regulatory process to sell your device in a few years instead of 5 or 6 or 7 years. And knowing the regulatory landscape of whatever you're developing is crucial. I think the stat is 80% of startup funding goes towards regulatory FDA-related activities. And so knowing that is super important. Sorry, I'm a little nervous if you haven't noticed. So basically, the way that I'm going about the company is pain for a non-invasive device like this is no risk because there's plenty of predicate devices available to get FDA approval early. But the real breakthrough would be for type 2 diabetes. And so the way that this works is you target non-invasively on your back. So right here, you put the device right here and it delivers current to the dorsal root ganglion for pain. But for type 2 diabetes, you target the greater splanchnic nerve and other parts of your sympathetic chain. And there's companies like Galvani Bioelectronics. It's like a startup from Verily. They're doing this, but invasively. So I'm doing the same thing they're doing, non-invasively. I'm trying to be the next Galvani, I guess. And so this is how it works for type 2 diabetes. So everyone thinks of type 2 diabetes as insulin resistance. And it's really a neurological disorder. And so there's a lot of startups looking at this. Your liver is really important in the disease state, and if you can block the nerves innervating your liver that are hyperactive, you can put more food that you eat into your liver instead of having it sit around in your bloodstream destroying your microvasculature. Because people with type 2 diabetes have hypersympathetic activity. So their liver is being told to release all the sugar instead of storing it here. And so they have lower glycogen levels. And there's a lot of basic research supporting this. And so hopefully, I'm hoping by next year, I can get approval for the pain and then do a non-significant risk study for the type 2 diabetes. And so I'm looking for clinical partnerships that sort of expedite IRBs, and we can do lots of clinical indications. And yeah, I'm interested in anybody who's interested in learning more about it. So thank you very much.
And our last pitch is coming from Lamarck Polvado with Care Starter.
We should give you bonus points for getting that even out of your mouth. It's kind of hard. It's great to be in a room full of visionaries like you guys. I see some visionaries. I got JC in the back doing mental health, Scott up here in biomedical. I just met Gus doing some amazing things in the community. And I love nerds. It's good to be in health nerd land. So let's see. Can I get to my pitch here? Oh, there we go. My nerd is all about pediatrics. And we have this crazy theory at Care Starter that patients, just wait for it, are people. Let that sink in for a minute. Patients are people. And in pediatrics, that means I have a kid, I have a teen that's going to become a young adult. Kids grow up, and they need different resources along the way. And so what Care Starter does is we automate and scale care management. And I want you to go on a journey with me. Who's ready? Okay, 2 people. Who's ready? I'm going to keep going. Who's ready? Okay, good. Here's the journey. When I say health, most people think of the hospital. It's true. The problem is the hospital and health care is 20% of the equation. That's it. So where is health found? Health is found here in your community, where you live. That is where health is. And 80% of the resources that families need to be successful are in their community, but they aren't accessing them. And this is a massive problem. And so here we go. Anybody remember Family Feud? I'm going to identify a disconnect that's a little less nerdy than the last pitch. But essentially, when you look at disconnect, we looked at families and physicians. And the first thing we said is, we want you to rank what's important to you. All right, so everybody ready? Survey says, families say community information is the number 1 need in their life. Physicians rank that as 14. You starting to see the picture? Right? How about financial information? What does that rank for families versus physicians? Families rank this as their second need, and physicians rank this as number 5. Right? How about recreational opportunities? Now you guys are like, whoa, Lamarck, hang on a second. Yeah, parks, recreational opportunities. Ready? Survey says, families said this was the 4th most important thing to them. Physicians ranked this at 13. So this is a really interesting disconnect. And then we spent time with families who realized families grow up. So the resources they needed at 5 are not the resources they need at 8, are not the resources they need at 16. Kids grow up. So to resource families, we can't do it once at a doctor's visit. We actually persistently empower them for 18 to 30 years. Why 30, Lamarck? Well, my daughter, who just turned 18, has autism. And guess what? We're just now, in the last month, filing a special needs trust, guardianship, trying to understand what she's going to do for the rest of life and how her life can have the maximum meaning. Think about that for a second. And then we spent time with physicians, and this one was interesting. They had 10 minutes to do these 3 things. This is what UCLA says. They're trying to manage the family unit, solve the medical mystery, and deal with the emotion trauma of the family. And I don't know about you, but that seemed like mission impossible. You ready? This is where Care Starter comes in. So what we do is we have the world's only predictive crisis model in pediatrics. And I'm going to share with you the results of a case study that just came out of 22,000 lives in San Antonio. But what we do for the physicians is we're managing the family unit, and we're dealing with the emotional trauma that happens. And so this is very key. So all of a sudden, physicians can focus on solving the medical mystery and allow us to automate and scale care management and care coordination. So here's our pilot that just finished up, 22,000 pediatric lives. We had 0 case managers. This is a federally qualified health center. And if you've ever worked with them, you understand the challenge they face on a daily basis is immense. And when we took this pilot, I thought, man, I don't know if we can do this. And we measured 4 things. Number 1 is, could we extend their reach? So Texas had a CMS study, and they got to 14% of lives with case managers in federally qualified health centers. With Care Starter, we went from 0% getting resources in this model to reaching 100% of their patient population. We're delivering what we call a care map. And that's great, but it only matters if they adopt it, and we have a 70% adoption rate in this patient population. I want to let that sink in for a minute. Remember that number one need on survey says on Family Feud? That's a real thing. That's why patients are adopting our system. They need information and they want resources. And here's that, dive in a little bit deeper. But how did we change the amount of resources families were getting? So before CARE started with CommuniCare, on average 0 to 3 resources per doctor's visit. On average, when we average our care maps together, families are getting 44 resources per visit. Think about that for a minute. So getting those families to these resources, and notice the resources are not just medical and they're not just therapy, but they're in 6 major categories that families need. And finally, in healthcare, we have to make dollars and cents of the problem. We estimate we will save CommuniCare over $500,000 as they move towards case management. The $1 million question I got asked, Lamarck, how many care managers am I going to need for 22,000 lives? My answer was I have no clue. Now we have that answer via data. And what we know now is we've reduced that number all the way down to 3.5 case managers. And here's why. We have 30% of our patients that are not adopting, so guess who we need to reach out to? So we can assign people hours to that problem and solve the equation. So, got to 100% of lives with 1,300% more resources with a 70% adoption rate, and that is what CareStarter does every day. We want to meet you. I'm the only member of my team here tonight, but we have quite an amazing team here in Austin. We're a Capital Factory company, and we have some all-star advisors. Some of you would like to probably meet them as well. I'd love to introduce you to them. Some amazing folks along the way. I hope to hear your vision of healthcare, and by the way, my vision of healthcare in the next 5 years in Austin is for every child to have resources persistently over time for 18 to 30 years. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So that concludes the program part of our evening. So feel free to come get refreshments and network with each other. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone, for coming.